2, 1.
A violent political attack shocks the nation. Joe Scarborough compares President Trump to 9/11 terrorists, and the Washington Post blames President Trump for a hurricane. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Well, glad to be back, saving the world once again from the steaming pile that is Michael Knowles, who apparently took over my radio show for a couple of days in my absence. I just cannot believe that such things happen while I am gone. We'll get to all of the latest news, but first, let's talk about your sleep quality. Because the fact is, you're sleeping on a mattress probably built for somebody else, and there's no reason for that. Instead, you should be checking out Helix Sleep. Helix Sleep has built a sleep quiz. It takes 2 minutes to complete. They use the answers to match your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress. Whether you're a side sleeper, a hot sleeper, whether you like a plush or firm bed, with Helix, there's no more guessing and no more confusion. All you have to do is go to helixsleep.com/Ben. You take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they will match you to a mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. I know their mattresses are great because I have one. My wife and I took the sleep quiz. It arrived in the mail, the mattress, and then we opened it up and it just inflated right in front of us. We tossed it on the bed frame. We were good to go. It's incredibly comfortable. We took a more expensive mattress and moved it out of our room because the Helix Sleep mattress is so good. I even got one for my sister for her wedding. Go check it out right now. They have a 10-year warranty and you get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free as well. So there's really no reason not to do it. Right now, Helix is offering up to $125 off all mattress orders. Again, $125 off at helixsleep.com/Ben. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for $125 off your mattress order. Once more, helixsleep.com/Ben. Go check it out. Alrighty, so we begin today with a violent attack that, if the parties had been reversed, would be national news on every major channel. Instead, it was sort of news inside the conservative ecosystem. Here is the story. According to CBS San Francisco, a man was arrested on suspicion of felony assault and other charges after allegedly attempting to stab a Republican congressional candidate with a switchblade over the weekend in Castro Valley, according to the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. On Sunday, September 9th, at approximately 3:45 p.m., deputies working at the Castro Valley Fall Festival were alerted to a possible knife attack at one of the vendor booths. Deputies arrived at the booth and made contact with the victim, Republican candidate Rudy Peters, who's running against incumbent Eric Swalwell for the 15th congressional district seat. The Castro Valley News first reported on the attack. According to witnesses, 35-year-old Castro Valley resident Farzad Fazeli approached Peters at his booth in an aggressive manner and made disparaging, profanity-laced remarks about the Republican Party and President Donald Trump. During the incident, Fazeli allegedly pulled out a switchblade knife and attempted to stab Peters. The knife malfunctioned. The candidate became involved in a physical struggle with Fazeli, according to the Sheriff's Sergeant Ray Kelly. The suspect then fled the scene but was later detained by deputies and found in possession of a switchblade knife. Now, this isn't national news. It's regional news, and the reason it's regional news is because the guy was cursing about Trump. If this had been an acolyte of President Trump, who is instead attacking a Democrat or a member of the media, this would be national news, because then we'd have a national conversation about the extent to which rhetoric on the left is generating violence. And there are some folks on the right who are qualified to speak on this. For example, Representative Steve Scalise, the House Majority Whip. Steve Scalise, you will recall, was shot nearly to death in a congressional baseball attack. They were playing baseball, a bunch of Congress people, and an anti-Trump Bernie Sanders supporter walked up and started shooting folks up. I said at the time, Bernie Sanders is not responsible for the actions of a crazy person who decides to shoot up a bunch of Republican Congress people. But that story disappeared from the news in about a week. We would still be talking about that story if it were a bunch of Democrats. Here is Steve Scalise explaining that some people on the left incite violence. Here's what Scalise had to say. He said, you've got some people on the left that just want this idea of resist and ignore the fact Trump is president. They want to interrupt the ability of Congress to do its job. And of course, you've got death threats and literal attacks on lives. And frankly, I want to see the left stand up to this. And of course, Scalise should know, and Scalise is right. And this is not the only evidence of violence and violent threats coming from folks on the left. Again, in the media, all you hear is people on the right have grown increasingly violent thanks to President Trump's rhetoric and the escalated rhetoric of recent years. You never hear this about folks on the left, even as mainstream anchors like Chris Cuomo on CNN defend Antifa, an actual violent domestic terror group. Here's another story from yesterday. According to Ryan Saavedra over at Daily Wire, a supporter of the Democratic Socialists of America has reportedly threatened to shoot up a Make America Great Again event at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. Law enforcement officials with the Metropolitan Police Department have opened up an investigation in response to the threat, which was posted to Twitter on Tuesday, according to the Daily Mail. The Twitter account wrote to right-wing pundit Cassandra Fairbanks, I am coming with a gun, and I expect to get numerous bloodstained MAGA hats as trophies. The account used the DSA logo as its profile photo, added an emoji of a rose to its name, which is common among DSA supporters. And shortly after the threat was posted, the owner of the account changed their Twitter handle as well. So that's another story of left-wing threats to violence. Here's another one. A Republican Party office in Laramie, Wyoming, caught fire early Thursday morning, just days after it opened, the Daily Caller News Foundation learned. This is a bit of an older story. This one is from September 6th. The fire appears to have been set intentionally, according to Laramie Police Department spokesman Steve Morgan. The local police department is cooperating with the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in the ongoing investigation, according to Morgan, adding that authorities have not yet identified a suspect or a motive for the fire. That's not a major shock. There have been attacks on Republican Party offices for the past several years, actually. For the last couple of years, there have been attacks on Republican Party offices. And again, the motive of the person who is engaging in the attack seems to be the only thing that the media definitely care about. If the person is motivated by pro-Trump animus, then that person gets all sorts of press. If the person is motivated by anti-Trump, anti-right-wing animus, then the person gets no press at all. If it turns out the person was a racist lunatic, then it's a major story. If it turns out the person was a left-wing environmentalist lunatic, then the story gets virtually no coverage. And the reason for this is because while the left does not, in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, agree with violent rhetoric, the left does agree with pretty extreme rhetoric about the right that they would never tolerate from folks on the right. And I speak today specifically of a column by Joe Scarborough. So Joe Scarborough yesterday put out a piece in the Washington Post in which he suggested that President Trump is harming the dream of America more than any foreign adversary ever could. His contention is that Trump is basically worse for America than 9/11. That is his contention. Now, again, is Joe Scarborough responsible for violence against pro-Trump people? No, he's not. I have a very simple rule, and I've held this rule consistently since long before Trump was president. I held it with regard to Barack Obama. If you're not overtly calling for violence, you're not responsible for violence on behalf of people who, quote unquote, agree with you. Because then it's going to be very easy to malign mainstream political opinions because there are a lot of folks who are crazy who agree with mainstream political commentators. So instead, what I've said, and I think this is the relevant gauge, is that you're only held responsible for the violence of people who take you up on your offer of violence or on your urging of violence. Then we can fairly say that rhetoric was involved in violence. It is true, however, that as we raise the temperature in the country, as we raise the temperature on the rhetoric, there are people who are on the fringe, and those people are more likely to be activated by the extreme feeling that they are getting from the nature of today's politics. Think of politics like ripples in a pond. And the epicenter of those ripples, the very center of those ripples, when you throw the rock in the pond, that's a political event. And as the ripples move out, they encompass a larger and larger group of people and a more and more fringe group of people. So if politics are now reaching a more fringe group of people and making those people more apt to feel extreme, more apt to engage in violence, then that's something we ought to be watching. And it's one of the reasons we ought to be taking the temperature down at least a little bit. Here's Joe Scarborough, though, encouraging at least this sort of extremism in rhetoric. Again, this is a guy who, it is worthwhile to recall, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski on MSNBC spent months pumping President Trump. Months pumping President Trump. Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski had him on the show. They sat with him during the primaries. They kept talking about what a great guy he was. They enjoyed the ratings boost that they got from hanging out with President Trump. Now, of course, President Trump is the worst thing since New Coke. Here is Joe Scarborough explaining why the President of the United States is worse than 9/11. Here's what he said. He said, cataclysmic events often bring with them violent and abrupt endings to settled ages and long-established norms. Those absorbing the impact of these historical aftershocks rarely grasp the epical changes in real time. Who could have imagined during their commute home on the night of November 21st, 1963, that an event in Dallas the next day would shake the post-war order guaranteed by America's victory in World War II? Even after Lee Harvey Oswald's shots rang out from the Texas School Book Depository, could anyone have foreseen the collapse of such an ordered age soon overtaken by the anarchy of Vietnam, the murders of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy, the race riots, Chicago, Kent State, Watergate, post-industrial rot, and the cultural chaos set loose across the country by these events? And could even the most insightful observer have foreseen, while staring at the billowing smoke set against New York's brilliant September sky, the avalanche of strategic blunders set in motion by Osama bin Laden's attack on the United States? Of course not. But 2 wars, 3 presidents, and 17 years later, the tragic lessons of that time are still lost on our leaders. And then he goes on to talk about the United States deploying its various resources and how the various parties dealt with 9/11. But then he gets to President Trump. And here's what he says. 17 years later, endless wars abroad and reckless policies at home have produced annual deficits approaching $1 trillion. First of all, that's a lie. The reason that we actually have a $1 trillion deficit every year is because of social programs. It is not because of war. The reason that we have a massive, massive deficit is not because of the war. It is because of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which constitute somewhere on the order of 66% of the federal budget each and every year in mandatory spending. But Scarborough then continues. President Trump's Republican Party will create more debt in 1 year than was generated in the first 200 years of America's existence. And it's always fun to watch as people who didn't care all that much about Barack Obama's debts suddenly care about Donald Trump's debts, and vice versa, by the way. Republicans don't care about debt anymore. They used to care about debt an awful lot. But the part that's really astonishing about this Scarborough column is when he gets to the end. He says, for those of us still believing that Islamic extremists hate America because of the freedoms we guarantee to people, the gravest threat Trump poses to our national security is the damage done daily to America's image. As the New York Times' Roger Cohen wrote the month after Trump's election, America is an idea. Strip freedom, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law from what the United States represents to the world, and America itself is gutted. Osama bin Laden was killed by SEAL Team 6 before he accomplished that goal. Other tyrants who tried to do the same were consigned to the ash heap of history. The question for voters this fall is whether their country will move beyond this troubled chapter in history, or whether they will continue supporting a politician who has done more damage to the dream of America than any foreign adversary ever could. So apparently Donald Trump has now done more to damage America than, the murder of 3,000 Americans on 9/11. And the murder of Americans, by the way, aboard the USS Cole. This sort of rhetoric is not particularly helpful. I'll give you another example of this sort of rhetoric in just a second. Donald Trump apparently responsible for every horrible thing that happens in the universe. It's amazing. If the left were to simply restrict their criticism of President Trump to the relevant, if they were simply to say, President Trump, not a supremely competent guy, the people around him maybe keeping him on track, but is this somebody who you really want to trust? Is this somebody who you really trust to make the right decisions for you? They'd have a lot better shot at winning back power than they will just screaming to the sky about how President Trump controls everything. And honestly, people on the right who resonate to this and think President Trump does control everything are contributing to a belief that government can solve all of your problems. When you believe that government is the only thing that matters, that government can solve all of your problems, or it causes all of your problems, you're more likely to fall into a pit of extremism and extreme feeling and rhetoric about the government that makes the condition of the country a lot worse rather than better. I'm going to talk about the latest example from the Washington Post in just a second. But first, let's talk about the folks who work at your company. So in my absence, Michael Knowles did a radio show for 2 days. And this has made me think, should I replace Michael Knowles? I mean, I've been thinking about that for quite a long time. If I do decide to replace Michael Knowles, I know I've been urged by others to do so, and only the better angels of my nature prevent this. If I were to do this, I would go over to ZipRecruiter.com right now, because ZipRecruiter is the best way to replace your bad employees with better employees. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one, spotlights the top candidates, so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. With results like that, it's no wonder ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in the United States. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Again, ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire, DAILYWIRE, ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. Get better employees, get new employees, best way to hire. ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Try it out for free. Okay, so not only is President Trump worse than 9/11, according to the editorial board at the Washington Post, President Trump is responsible for hurricanes. He rocks you like a hurricane. President Trump, apparently, through flatulence alone, can generate hurricanes. Here is what the Washington Post says. This is their editorial board. But don't worry, they're not generating a feeling of extreme rhetoric with regard to politics in any way, shape, or form. Politics is the be-all, end-all. Here's what they say, quote, yet again, a massive hurricane feeding off unusually warm ocean water has the potential to stall over heavily populated areas, menacing millions of people. Last year, Hurricane Harvey battered Houston. Now Hurricane Florence threatens to drench already waterlogged swaths of the East Coast, including the nation's capital. If the Category 4 hurricane does indeed hit the Carolinas this week, it will be the strongest storm on record to land so far north. President Trump issued several warnings on his Twitter feed Monday, counseling those in Florence's projected path to prepare and listen to local officials. That was good advice. Yet, when it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit. He's complicit. Apparently, the hurricane calls up the president, and the president's like, listen, I can't help you out, hurricane. But what I can do is I can keep my mouth shut. I will be complicit in your sins, hurricane. He plays, so it used to be the Democrats blamed the Juden for the weather. Right? We got that from that Democrat crazy person in Washington, D.C. The Jews were responsible for the weather. Now President Trump is controlling the weather. There's this meme on Twitter where you say something like, President Trump, I can't believe he just did, flips through notebook, and then you land on some random thing. Right? So flip through, I can't believe that he's responsible for flips through notebook. Dog abandonment. Right? This is that, right? I can't believe President Trump is responsible for flips through notebook. Hurricane. Hey, here's what they say. He plays down humans' role in increasing the risks. He continues to dismantle efforts to address those risks. And now let's just be straight. If President Trump signed on to every leftist proposal on global warming today, it would have no impact on hurricanes today. None. Okay, so that hurricane would still be coming down the pike. Okay, but they say it is hard to attribute any single weather event to climate change, which is their admission. They have no way to actually attribute this hurricane to climate change, but that's not going to stop them. There is no reasonable doubt that humans are priming the Earth's systems to produce disasters. Well, I mean, there's some reasonable doubt about the level to which humans are doing that and the solutions that can be taken with regard to it. In fact, in 1 second, I'm going to give you all the evidence. But the Washington Post continues. They say, atmospheric research, Kevin Trenberth, a climate researcher at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, co-wrote a May paper showing that Harvey's cataclysmic wetness came from the unusual hot Gulf of Mexico water that fed the hurricane before it slammed into Texas. Harvey could not have produced so much rain without human-induced climate change, he and his colleagues concluded. Now Florence is feasting on warm Atlantic Ocean water, all of which, by the way, drove the president to say that this hurricane was extremely hard and extremely wet, which was very weird. Now Florence is feasting on warm Atlantic Ocean water, says the Washington Post. The ocean is warming up systematically, Mr. Trenberth said, explaining that through natural variation can turn surface temperatures up or down a bit, the ocean's energy content is inexorably rising. It is the strongest signal of global warming, Mr. Trenberth added. It's very weird how everything bad that happens is an effect of global warming. If it's bad snowstorms, it's an effect of global warming. If it's a bad hurricane, it's an effect of global warming. Again, I'm not somebody who believes that humans are not contributing to global warming. I think that humans probably are contributing to global warming by all available evidence. The question is, what is the climate sensitivity? How much are humans contributing to global warming? And what can actually be done about that? Is maybe the best idea technological progress as opposed to cap and trade systems that are actually not going to mitigate the effects of global warming in any serious way. But the Washington Post nonetheless blames the President of the United States. They say the Trump administration has now attacked all three pillars of President Barack Obama's climate change plan. Except that when Barack Obama had his plan, the hurricanes were still hitting the United States, so this is quite silly. Also, it is worth noting that major hurricanes in the United States are at about their average. Okay, so it's funny. The latest line that you were hearing, for a while, what you were hearing from the left was the number of hurricanes is increasing. That's not true. The number of hurricanes is not increasing. Now they say the number of hurricanes is not increasing, but the severity of hurricanes is increasing. So let's look at the stats. According to this guy, James Taylor, who's president of the Spark of Freedom Foundation over at Forbes.com, he actually went through decade by decade to look at the number of major hurricanes hitting the United States. So from 2001 to 2010, 7 major hurricanes struck the United States, which is the 100-year average. During the preceding decade, 6. During the decade before that, 4. Before that, 4. And then from 1961 to 1970, 7. Okay, from 1951 to 1960, 9. From 1941 to 1950, 11 major hurricanes struck the United States. During 1931 to 1940, 8 major hurricanes struck the United States. From 1921 to 1936, from 1911 to 1928. So the idea that we are now in the midst of some massive upswing in the number of radical hurricanes hitting the United States, the statistics simply do not bear that out. Now, is that a reason to ignore whatever threats global warming is posing? No, it isn't. But to blame President Trump, who's been in office for a year and a half, for a hurricane hitting is just insane. It's just insane. And of course, most people are only going to read the headline anyway, and the impression they're going to get is that President Trump simply doesn't care about hurricanes, or President Trump is somehow forwarding hurricanes, or the rest of this sort of silliness. I think it is fair to say that media coverage has gone off the rails. And it's not just with regard to President Trump. It's also with regard to sort of normal Republican candidates. So the latest evidence of this is the Washington Post, again, they're the newspaper of the day, going after Ron DeSantis. So on Sunday, the Washington Post had 2 Post reporters put together a story that Ron DeSantis spoke at a conservative conference 4 times between 2007, 2013, and 2017. He spoke at the David Horowitz Freedom Center Conference. Okay, and these are usually take place in Florida. I know this because this is where I met Ron DeSantis. I met Ron DeSantis at this event at the David Horowitz Freedom Center in Florida. According to the Washington Post, this means that Ron DeSantis is no longer fit for office because he spoke 4 times at conferences organized by a conservative activist who has said that African Americans owe their freedom to white people and that the country's only serious race war is against whites. Okay, so they're going to pick everything that David has ever said that is wild, and they're going to now attribute it to Ron DeSantis. As opposed to when Bill Clinton stands next to Louis Farrakhan at Aretha Franklin's funeral, and no one has to answer a question about us. Now Ron DeSantis goes and speaks at what is, by any measure, a normal conservative conference with a wide variety of speakers. I mean, we are talking about major politicians in the Republican Party who have shown up there. It's not all people who agree with David. I know. I used to work at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. I was on the board of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And not everyone who shows up agrees with everything that David Horowitz says. I didn't agree with everything that David Horowitz said. But the Washington Post ran this long story suggesting that because DeSantis had spoken at this event, therefore he agrees with everyone at the event, which is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. But that's the way the press are going to treat our politics these days. And then they're surprised when it feels like there's a violent upsurge in American politics. Again, they're not responsible for that violent upsurge unless they call for violence. They are responsible for raising the temperature on American rhetoric to a dangerous point. I mean, meanwhile, Norm MacDonald is now in trouble because we can't have any nice things. We'll talk about that in just a second. First, let's talk about what you're doing for your stamps. So are you heading over to the post office? And the post office is great, but do you really want to spend the time in the car? Do you really want to spend the time in line? Maybe you should just get all the great services of the post offices right from your desk, and you can with Stamps.com. With Stamps.com, you can access all the amazing services of the post office right from your desk 24/7 when it is convenient for you. Buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, using your own computer and printer. The mail carrier picks it up. Just click, print, mail, you're done. It could not be easier. We use it here at the Daily Wire offices. We have their postage meter, their digital scale, and we can tell exactly how much postage we're supposed to print out. You print it onto a sticker, onto an envelope, and then you just take all that and put it in the mail, and you're good to go. Again, we use it here. I use it at home as well. Right now, use promo code Shapiro for a special offer, including up to $55 of free postage, a digital scale, and a 4-week trial, which is pretty spectacular. Go to Stamps.com. Before you do anything else, click on the radio microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Shapiro. Again, Stamps.com. Before you do anything else, click on that radio microphone at the top of the homepage, type in Shapiro. That's Stamps.com. Promo code Shapiro for that special offer, including up to $55 of free postage, a digital scale, and a 4-week trial. So the culture wars continue in my absence. Norm MacDonald, who's doing the only Netflix special that I'm actually interested in these days, he is now being ripped up and down for an interview that he did in The Hollywood Reporter. He was uninvited from The Tonight Show on NBC, Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show on NBC. Apparently, you're only allowed to go on NBC if you are either an ardent Democrat or a person who worked for a company that actually covered up for Harvey Weinstein's sexual abuses. If you're one of the, or worked with Matt Lauer, if you're one of those, then I guess you can go on Jimmy Fallon's show. But if you express sympathy for Louis C.K. or Roseanne Barr, then you are in serious trouble. Norm MacDonald is now in serious trouble. Why? Because Norm MacDonald happens not to be a radical leftist. So he was talking to The Hollywood Reporter, and he was asked about the emboldening of racism. He said, I live in L.A., where I'm always faced with the lunacy of the left. I didn't know the same lunacy existed on the right. So I never really bought into the notion that everybody is racist because there was a black president, you know? But the Sacha Baron Cohen show has been a frightening eye-opener. I was also in a bubble, but in a different way. I guess everyone is an effing idiot. Everyone is an ideologue. Hopefully the pendulum will slow down in the next 4 years. And the Hollywood Reporter person presses and swing back toward liberalism because it's the Hollywood Reporter. And he says, not necessarily. He says, I'm happy the Me Too movement has slowed down a little bit. It used to be 100 women can't be lying, and then it became one woman can't lie, and then it became I believe all women, and then you're like, what? Like that Chris Hardwick guy, I really thought got the blunt end of the stick there. And the Hollywood Reporter said, what about when someone admits to wrongdoing? And Norm MacDonald said, quite reasonably, the model used to be admit wrongdoing, show complete contrition, and then we give you a second chance. Now it's admit wrongdoing and you're finished. And so the only way to survive is to deny, deny, deny. That's not healthy, that there is no forgiveness. I do think at some point it will end with a completely innocent person of prominence sticking a gun in his head and ending it. That's my guess. I know a couple of people this has happened to. And they ask who? And here's where he gets himself into trouble. He says, well, Louis C.K. and Roseanne Barr are two people I know. And Roseanne was so broken up after the show's reboot was canceled, I got Louis to call her, even though Roseanne was very hard on Louis before that. But she was just so broken and just constantly crying. There are very few people that have gone through what they have, losing everything in a day. Of course, people will go, what about the victims? But you know what? The victims didn't have to go through that. And then they ask, you know, what did the two of them talk about? He said they had a good conversation. And he said she's not a racist. Everybody knows that she's not a racist, but she shouldn't have tweeted the stuff that she tweeted. He got all sorts of flack, particularly about the Louis C.K. comment, because the implication seems to be that Louis C.K. was innocent of any wrongdoing, when, of course, Louis C.K. was basically inviting female comedians back to his room and then masturbating in front of them. And then apparently his associates were calling up networks and trying to get them to lose jobs, but there's no actual evidence that Louis C.K. was engaged in that particular activity. Louis C.K. is back, but the left media is not interested in Louis C.K. repairing his image. By the way, if you're Jimmy Fallon and you don't want to have Norm MacDonald on for saying this, you will have Bill Clinton on to talk specifically about essentially being accused of rape, and that's totally fine. You can't ask Norm MacDonald a tough question. That's the part of this that's so crazy. Let's say you disagree with Norm MacDonald here. Let's say you think what he thinks is unreasonable. Why wouldn't you have him on and just ask him about it? The reason is because we live in such a ridiculously censorious society that we have to make sure that people like Norm MacDonald are never heard. The reason Norm MacDonald is taking it on the chin here is because he's a Republican. If Norm MacDonald were not mildly conservative, then he would be let go with very little after effects. We know this because he apologized for it, and they're still not inviting him on the Tonight Show. Right? Matt Damon made comments about Me Too. He was welcomed back into civil society. There are no accusations, by the way, that Norm MacDonald has ever participated in any sort of bad activity with regard to women. And yet he's being put on the outs because he expressed sympathy for Roseanne Barr or for Louis C.K., people whose careers have been ruined by allegations. Roseanne Barr's career was ruined because she tweeted out dumb racist crap. But should she be forgiven? I think probably. Louis C.K., should he be forgiven? He seems to have expressed contrition, like right from the outset, and then he went away for a while. I'm not sure what else you want from him. I mean, you could file a lawsuit. It seems to me that a lot of this, if you really believe you have a lawsuit against Louis C.K., perhaps you should sue him. If you really believe you have credible allegations against Louis C.K., perhaps you should sue him. Perhaps you should take to the court. Because the court of public opinion is a really nasty place, and destroying people's lives and careers based on accusations that you're not willing to back up in court, you're not even willing to try to back up in court, seems like a difficult business to me. It's hard for us to set an objective standard if you're not willing to take this stuff to court. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't believe the allegations about Louis C.K. I tend to believe the allegations about Louis C.K., particularly since he admitted them. But it does mean that we have to have some standard. When Norm MacDonald says there's no standard, I don't think that he's completely wrong. Of course there's no standard here. It's obvious there's no standard here. Okay, well, meanwhile, I want to talk a little bit about the holiday that, before I get to the holiday that I just celebrated, I also want to talk about Hillary Clinton. So this is an amazing thing. Hillary Clinton decided that it was necessary to step into the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings while I was away. So she tweeted out this morning, I want to be sure we're all clear about something that Brett Kavanaugh said in his confirmation hearings last week. He referred to birth control pills as abortion-inducing drugs. That set off a lot of alarm bells for me, and it should for you too. And then she continued by suggesting that Brett Kavanaugh was actually going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and he hates abortion, and that's really why he said all this. This is a lie. It is a lie that has been debunked multiple times. Senator Kamala Harris trotted out this lie over and over and over again. The Washington Post gave it 4 Pinocchios. The reason that Brett Kavanaugh referred to abortifacients as abortion-inducing drugs is because they are abortion-inducing drugs and were expressed as such in the Supreme Court decision that he was citing. But Hillary Clinton comes out after this thing has been debunked by her own favorite publications and continues to parrot lies. Again, when it comes to the culture wars, the reason that so many folks are with Norm MacDonald and frustrated and with President Trump is because the left refuses to call out its own. The left refuses to call out Joe Scarborough for saying ridiculous things. The left refuses to call out Hillary Clinton for saying things that are obvious lies. The left refuses to call out Michelle Goldberg, who suggests that Brett Kavanaugh is going to usher in the handmaid's court. And then you wonder why the politics are polarized. It's ridiculous. Okay, now I do want to get to what I did over the last couple of days. So I was absent for the last couple of days to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the Jewish year. So it's the Jewish New Year. And more importantly than being the Jewish New Year, unlike sort of the secular New Year where you party it up and then you make resolutions for the next year, the Jewish New Year is all about atoning for sin. So we are now in the midst of the High Holy Days, which is typically used to express sort of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I'm about to explain to you why I'm going to be absent for a bunch of days coming up. So this is why. Rosh Hashanah was a 2-day holiday that happened Monday, Tuesday, and then a week from today, I will be out again for Yom Kippur. That's the Day of Atonement. That's where you fast all day and you stay in synagogue essentially all day, and you pray for forgiveness, and then God hopefully inscribes you in the book of life. And then about 4 days after that, I'm out for another couple of days, and that one is for the holiday of the Festival of Booths, is what it's called in English, called Sukkot in Hebrew, and that is the one where we sit outside in these makeshift booths with palm fronds on top to remind us of when we were sojourning in the desert. And then we conclude with the last couple of days of Sukkot, which is like a week after that. There's a last couple of days. One is a concluding day of Sukkot, and the last one is Simchat Torah, which is when we celebrate the completion of the cycle of reading of the Torah. So Jews every week read a portion of the Torah, and then over the course of 50 weeks, we go through the entire Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and then we celebrate. I'm going to explain why I'm explaining all this to you in just 1 second. But first, let's talk about your hair. Look up top, okay? Take a look in the mirror. You're not thinking about your hair right now. I promise you, by the time you're looking, it's too late because you're already losing your hair, which is why you need Keeps. Maybe you've noticed you have a little less hair than you used to have, but you're not sure there's a real solution. The thing is, there are 2 clinically proven medications that let you keep your hair, and now they are inexpensive and easy to get. You don't need to lose that hair if you don't want to, which is why I'm telling you about Keeps. For 5 minutes now and just $1 a day, you're not going to have to worry about hair loss ever again. Getting started with Keeps is really easy. Sign up takes less than 5 minutes. Just answer a few questions, snap some photos. A licensed doctor remotely reviews your information, recommends the right treatment for you, all without ever leaving your couch. Keeps offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products out there. Some of you probably tried them before, but you've never gotten them this easily for this price. Keeps is only $10 to $35 a month. Plus, right now you can get your first month for free, which is a heck of a deal for getting to keep your hair. To receive that first month of treatment for free, all you have to do is go to keeps.com/Ben. That's KEEPS.com/Ben. Again, a free month of treatment at keeps.com/Ben. Keeps, hair today, hair tomorrow. Keeps.com/Ben. Go check it out right now. Okay, well, we are going to discuss a couple of insane articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, rather, with regard to religion, which is why I'm mentioning Rosh Hashanah. I also want to talk about Serena Williams. I missed that whole controversy while I was out. The world continued while I was out. I just can't believe it. I thought the world was going to stop spinning, and then I would be able to come back and pick up where we left off. I'd be able to analyze last Friday's Obama speech. It would have been great fun. Unfortunately, the world kept spinning, so we'll get to all of the latest news in just 1 second. But first, go over to dailywire.com to subscribe. $9.99 a month gets you a subscription to Daily Wire. When you get that, you get the rest of this show live, the rest of Andrew Klavan's show live, the rest of Michael Knowles' awful show live. You get all of those things. Plus, for your annual subscription, you get $99. You get this, the very greatest in beverage vessels, the leftist tears hot or cold tumbler. You know why I'm not sipping from it today? Because Jewish holiday. It's a fast day. I'm really thirsty. But you could be sipping from it today. All you had to do was go over and get that annual subscription over at dailywire.com. Go check that out. Also, when you subscribe over at YouTube or iTunes, then you get to view our Sunday special. Well, this week's Sunday special features the insane and entertaining Steven Crowder, who stopped by for an hour. Here's a little bit of what we talked about.
Hi, I'm Steven Crowder, and that's Ben Shapiro, but I don't think you can see him right now. I am going to be on the Ben Shapiro Sunday Special show. That's what it's called, right? The Ben Shapiro Sunday Special. Yeah, it's a big deal. There's one guest, and we're going to be talking about some things maybe off the beaten path, different side of Ben and myself that maybe you haven't necessarily seen before, and I think he's probably going to try and make me cry because I saw his show prep.
And we will see whether that indeed succeeded. All you'll have to do is watch this Sunday. All you have to do is subscribe at YouTube or iTunes. Go check it out. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.